the longer someone is in office, but it's never diminished rapidly. The recent slight improvement in approval ratings is based on history having been out of the country. Trump's intense need for conflict interferes with his ability to function effectively as leader of the world's greatest superpower. Trump, in his own words, likes to, quote, play with people's fantasies, test people, and he's busy picking fights and having to backtrack on many issues. These disruptive tendencies can be traced back to his early childhood and are ultimately self-defeating for his policies and disruptive for the country. The section is disruption as an integral part of his personality. As a child, and I'm quoting him extensively here, Trump delighted in being bad, being the toughest kid on the block, being very aggressive, a troublemaker. He disrupted schools by testing the rules, throwing spitballs, talking without permission, passing notes, and even, he claims, giving his second-grade music teacher a black eye. He says he was growing up to be a pretty tough kid who wanted to be the toughest kid in the neighborhood and had a habit of mouthing off to everyone while backing off to no one. I do this in counter quotes, I hope. His elder sister said he was a brat. Talking tough as the bad boy American politics has worked for Trump in winning the 2016 election, but so far has not worked in the actual presidency. Donald idealized his father Fred, an ambitious workaholic businessman who made no time to play with his kids. The first biographer of the Trump's family reports that like his father and grandfather, Donald would ultimately share the characteristics of being energetic, having a wide range of practical skills, doing almost anything to make a buck, and having a certain ruthlessness and a free and easy way with the truth. That's almost entirely a quote. There's absolutely no question that Donald absorbed his father's message that he should be a king, a winner, and a killer. However, rebelliousness strained Donald's relationships with his parents. They decided on drastic action when it was discovered that he, with a wealthy playmate, was secretly taking the subway to Manhattan and buying switchblade knives. Later in life, Trump reported that, quote, "I was very bad. That's why my parents sent me to a military academy," end quote. Next section, Trump's splitting of the world into good, bad, and narcissism. Trump lives in a world of good and bad. Something that serves his purpose is good, such as leaks during the campaign, and bad when it impacts himself negatively, such as leaks once he becomes president and he himself does not do the leaking. When he was in business, throughout his career, he was known as a leaker, sometimes on the telephone claiming to be his own spokesman, who he called John Barron. Okay. Projection, that is taking something within himself and attributing it to others, Trump does to an extraordinary degree. In studying him since the summer of 2015, I quickly learned that when he labels someone, there's a good chance he is projecting his own thoughts and behaviors. For example, when he called James Comey, a man with a well-earned reputation for integrity, discretion, for being low-key, a showboat, a grandstander, and a nutjob, characteristics would much more be apropos for him than for the former FBI director. His splitting the world into good and bad turned out to be an advantage with the electoral base. When he was at his rallies, he told people, "I love you." Since his supporters were the good people, and he laughed out the bad people, that is, the media, to him, any demonstrators who showed up, and of course Hillary Clinton, who was so bad that she should be put in jail, according to him. Early in his presidency, it is the news media that is the primary enemy. At his rallies, reporters were kept separate, walled off from his supporters. He lives in a world of walls that serve to split off the bad from the good. When it's convenient, he sees bad Mexicans, Muslims, and terrorists behind those walls, while he is a good person who can travel the world and doing business wherever he sees the potential for profit. Now, the narcissism of Donald John Trump is one of his most outstanding characteristics. While most people in the public arena reject the label of narcissism, he embraces the label. Most explicitly in his first book, The Art of the Deal, in 1987. In it, he justifies this quality by quoting the psychoanalyst's assertion that narcissism can be a useful quality when starting a business. Trump, at the Trump Organization, I listen to people, but it's my vision that counts. Trump then proceeds to write, quote, almost all successful alpha personalities display a single method determination to impose their vision of the world and a rational belief in unreasonable goals, bordering at times on lunacy, end quote. He proclaims his own alpha personality, determination, and very large ego. This helps to explain why the candidate Trump kept defying his advisors when they wanted him to sound more like a typical presidential aspirant. Now, when he was age 13 in summer camp, just prior to being exiled to military school, Donald had to face parental rejection. When feeling down, he would sprawl on his bed, staring at the large words, a precursor to his name, plastered on buildings, that he painted on the inside of the cabin door, Trump 59. Donald's answer to his early adolescent angst seemed to have been to strengthen his grandiose self. Therein lies the genesis of everything he can put his name on, and all his businesses mostly have had Trump attached to them as a name. To my mind, this represents a defense when feeling unloved and abandoned by his parents. Buried deeply behind Trump's almost lifelong grandiosity, I suspect there's a sad and vulnerable boy who's terrified of being called a loser, a label he likes to project onto others, including the war hero Senator John McCain. Trump is too competitive to allow anyone to be truly close to him emotionally, as described by his first-year military academy roommate, who said, Donald wasn't that tight with anyone. People liked him, but he didn't bond with anyone. I think it was because he was too competitive. And with a friend, you can't always be competitive. The roommate goes on to say, it was like he had this defensive wall around him. He wouldn't let anyone get close, end quote. Looking good and being surrounded by good-looking people was important to him. Thus, at the military academy, he dated only the most attractive girls. Subsequently, all three of his wives would be attractive models. To me, Trump appears to be a hollow man, lacking in compassion, empathy, and real friendship. And I could give many examples to illustrate that, but time does not allow it. He attempts to compensate for this human failing by accumulating billions, fame, presidency. People like the late Roy Cohn and now Steve Bannon have filled the void in their values. Thus, he is enamored of them. Trump's need for things and the applause of others is insatiable, which is why D'Antonio chose his title of Never Enough for his book on Trump and wrote, Donald Trump came to express a personality that was practically all in, all the time. He's at war with his critics, and this state of war is virtually lifelong. Trump called himself a counterpuncher, thus he gets his energy from responding to the criticism of others. This reminds me of the discredited Nixon declaring, "I just get up in the morning to confound my enemies." Moreover, while Trump ran as an anti-establishment populist, he is governing as a conservative who surrounds himself with the very wealthy. As far as draining the swamp, he's hired the swamp of Washington, well positioned and wealthy. My impression is that a significant part of the American establishment, especially the bureaucracy, is becoming a counterpuncher to Trump because of his constant attacks on them. When Trump tweets to his approximately 20 million followers, he feels they are on his side, but for how long? Now, the essence of being presidential is to have your own long-term objectives and the long-term interests of the country as your main priorities. Being presidential requires prudence, forming alliances with disparate groups rather than throwing off a barrage of criticisms. It also involves the ability not to act when there's strong societal pressures to do things such as go to war or take other damaging, dangerous actions. However, our 44th occupant of the White House simply does not know how to do this because his need for adoration and constant turmoil get in the way of other considerations. In conclusion, and this is a very short version of the paper, one of the great dangers when Trump is president is that he'll pick fights with other countries as a way of showing that he's in control, and because conflict is second nature to him. His lifelong inclination to disrupt, create enemies is likely to manifest itself when his agenda and that of his Republican allies diverge. It remains to be seen what the great disruptor, really great disruptor, will take our country. Now, in the 7th decade of his life, does Trump have the energy or the political skill to go against his conservative Republican allies, to endanger our allies, our democracy rather? Despite his strong authoritarian inclinations, at worst he's likely to be seen in the end as a type of American Silvio Berlusconi, I haven't killed that name, sorry, who is now viewed more as a bombastic Italian clown rather than as a Mussolini or Hitler. Even if he has the instincts or inclination of these two fascist leaders, our democracy is not as fragile as was theirs as was that of Italy in the aftermath of World War I, or Germany in the Great Depression. And furthermore, he does not have a party of loyal followers, fascist parties, Nazi parties that help keep other people in line. As a historian, I can vouch for America having survived many pretty bad presidents, and I think this is what we're in for, though we never know the future. Thank you. So he's our next presenter. Go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you for the introduction. As Professor Elovitz said, my name is Cifelli, and today I'll be speaking about the continued support Trump has in this country and how his supporters deal with the inconsistencies and distractions of his campaign and his young presidency. So it's difficult to understand how when you turn on the TV, you hear negative stories about Trump's behavior, and yet so many still support him. I'm not here to argue about the integrity of the media and whether the stories they run are true, since this is besides the point. Either way, Trump does not look good in the stories that every American is hearing, yet they are able to reconcile some of Trump's questionable or unpresidential, or even sometimes downright nasty behavior, comments, and actions, and show their support for him. As of May 27th, 53% disapprove of the job Trump is doing, yet still a significant 42% support him. In my presentation, I will discuss my observations and conversations in suburban New Jersey, in which I identified 4 defense mechanisms that people use both consciously and unconsciously in negating Trump's behavior. I will also discuss the general fantasy they have that drives them to use these defense mechanisms and continue their support for our president. First, I will elaborate on these 4 defense mechanisms, and then I will show the relationship to the vision of America that many of his supporters have. The first defense mechanism identified was that of displacement. Displacement is defined by Professor P.Elovitz as the shifting of emotion from one object to another. In the midst of every scandal and crisis Trump has faced, both as a candidate and as an unseasoned president, he has shifted to blame to either fake news, the Obama administration, crooked Hillary, or simply shifted attention to a new headline. In doing this, he provides his supporters with ready-made scapegoats onto which they can shift their frustration. Led by example, people tear down institutions like the press and others who have been unfriendly to President Trump. There is also denial involved in this, as some people choose to hear the evidence and stories presented by the media, but simply deny that there is any truth to what they hear. This is a simple and wholesale rejection of what they are presented. This is similar to choosing not to believe that a family member has passed away or some other truth that is too hard to accept. The third defense mechanism I found was being used by a group of older women in the grocery store whom I recognized and started a conversation with. The defense mechanism was intellectualization. They were talking about how Trump had a somewhat nasty demeanor in many situations, and were discussing his comments regarding Mexicans, women, and the infamous mocking a disabled reporter incident. The women all agreed that these videos deeply upset them. One summed up the contrast between her feelings and her vote for President Trump with the following comment: "You know, all that stuff is a real shame, and I would be ashamed if you were my son." This is a quote. "But you know what? We don't have to elect a nice guy. We have to elect a president." There's a lot to be taken from this quote. The way the woman removes the value from her emotions and removes the emotion from the decision of who to vote for shows the woman is intellectualizing. She is casting emotion as illogical and implies that the election of a president should be a logical decision, not one based on her emotions. As we all know here, the president is rarely chosen logically. On a more conscious level, supporters suppress their responses to the distracting news stories Trump creates, like the firing of James Comey or his tweets and the Russia investigation. Instead of delving deeper into these stories or engaging with people who view these stories as evidence of Trump being unpresidential, some of his supporters say that we should talk about the real issues, like ISIS, healthcare, and securing the border. Suppression is often manifested in changing the subject, like a way out of an awkward conversation, and this is exactly what's happening in the national conversation of Trump. So why do these people consciously and unconsciously displace, deny, intellectualize, and suppress their emotions regarding Trump? First, for many, the Trump-Clinton dichotomy is still alive all this time after the election. Trump has done his part in reliving the election trauma by still touting his electoral college results in recent interviews, months after he was inaugurated. So a reasonable response to Trump's drama is, well, it's still better than Clinton. Another justification I heard came from a friend of mine, the son of Cubans who escaped Castro. They said, "Listen, he's our president now, and I hope to God he's a good one." He had the attitude that all our wagons were hitched now, and to criticize him would be a moot point and counterproductive. Another friend, who is of Filipino descent, said that he voted for him and now felt obligated to follow through with his decision. He would feel like a hypocrite to acknowledge issues with him. Besides this, his father said that the backlash from the left had steeled his decision to support Trump simply to oppose and anger the elite liberals, and he said this in a defiant tone. The overwhelming majority of people I spoke to, whether it was in grocery stores, friends' homes, or dental offices, had this to say, that for them, Trump was bigger than just a man or a president. To them, he represented normal Americans' last stand against a cascade of higher taxes, immigrants, and political correctness. Although maybe he's not the perfect savior for them, he's the one who showed up at the right time. They can't pass on Trump because he's the last one they have. He's not the best man for the job, but the only one. Right after one man complained about how expensive dental care has become, he said of Trump, "When will this ever happen again?" To recognize Trump's flaws would be to give up hope on their dream for America, and that is why there is a disconnect. The news can publicize Trump's flaws and mistakes all day, but it will fall on deaf ears in many cases. The people who support Trump are not mean and uneducated people who don't respond to the logic of academia and the media, but in my observation, are an extremely hopeful and frustrated people trying to push back against what they view as an onslaught of liberal ideas. Trump is their last hope, and it is too tough for them to abandon hope.
Good morning again. I hope you're all doing okay. No response means it's a good response.
I fell down on my job as
what is
moderator. P.Petschauer is a very distinguished historian and psychohistorian who had a heck of a time getting here because of storms in Europe, where he's lived for most of the all of the Trump presidency until yesterday.
What's so fascinating, Paul, about that is Trump is not only well known in the United States. Because of his Twitter, he is known everywhere. Wherever you go, people talk about Trump. He has achieved something that is almost unbelievable. Not even Schwarzenegger has been able to be that successful. Don't look that way. What I want to talk about is authoritarian regimes and personalities. And we all know authoritarian personalities. We've all seen them in our jobs, we've seen them in our families, we've seen them in our governors or legislators, we've seen them in so many different settings. They exclude confidence, suppress different opinions, oppose those whom they dislike, argue, manipulate, ridicule, use temper tantrums, you forgot about that one, induce fear, lie extensively in extreme cases, they ostracize, imprison, torture, and murder. The last options are not usually welcome in democracies. But if Howard were here, he would probably say, it may feel as if you're being tortured and being fired for being on the wrong side is almost as bad as being murdered. I'm going to highlight some specific examples in the past, but also in the present, because the regimes that we now have across the world are frightening to me personally, but they're also fairly similar. And they're very similar in the way the people who run them have gotten into power and are exercising their power. Now we have regimes like authoritarian regimes in Russia, in Turkey, in Hungary, in Poland, in Czech Republic, China, Venezuela, and aspirant authoritarian regime in the United States. Sometimes these regimes become dictators, sometimes they don't, and I hope in this case, in our case, it will not become a dictatorship. The people who usually run such regimes have had very bad childhoods or complicated childhoods, fear, paranoia, narcissism, and others have been discussed on various panels here. Getting into power is an interesting one. Usually it involves slogans for the authoritarians. The slogans can be Deutschland über alles, Mussolini's La Qualità, making America great again. Then you have to make an impressive figure. Mussolini, Hitler, Erdogan. Putin, even without a uniform, made an impressive figure. Then there is the leadership cult. Flags everywhere, symbols of flags, fascia, swastikas, massive assemblies of troops, even before the person gets into power. Nuremberg, Red Square, patriotic music, American flags like I've never seen this many before on a podium. So there's the appeal of the flag. Promises to correct past wrongs, like the loss of a war, battle, some other readily recognizable misdeed, in some cases centuries earlier, and in some others recent. Milosevic's use of the Battle of Kosovo, Hitler's rants against the Versailles Treaty, Erdogan's idea that Europe and the Kurds are undermining Turkey, their fatherland, and Trump's talk about America as a loser. America as a loser, that's idiotic. But that's what he said, and people believed it. Particularly against China, Mexico, Canada, and now we're into Germany. Promises to correct past wrongs toward certain groups in the society and subgroups, like the unemployed and underemployed, those who feel left behind, or were truly left behind. Authoritarian promises new jobs, better lifestyle, put men back into the leading role in the household. To gain support, usually of conservative religious groups. Does that surprise you? Hitler had the support of conservative religious groups, been written up in very different journals. Putin, no less, has the support of the Orthodox Church. And of course, Trump, well, we don't need to know about Trump. Then a certain attack on individuals, certain individuals, generally disliked ethnic groups. Immigrants, more liberal religious groups, newspapers and other media, also other candidates for office. Hatred is such a satisfying quality. Like love, it can be all-consuming. The classic approach of exclusionary tactics toward minority groups is, of course, in Germany, the Jews. Milosevic against the Muslims, Erdogan against the Kurds, Trump with the Muslims, Mexicans, and so on. The others are different, of course. They're nasty. They're criminals. Look at them. And attack on women in some form or other. Put them back in the home. Plus Mussolini's and Berlusconi's and Trump's idea that women below 30, well, we don't look at them. He said that. The others did too. Berlusconi specifically said that. Use the latest forms of transported media. Highlight both promises and attacks. Mussolini used radio very effectively, also newspapers. Hitler swooping down from the skies on a plane. Trump swooping down from the skies with the plane, in his own Trump plane. Erdogan, use of TV, Twitter, the exploitation of lies and alternative facts. Hitler was very good at it. The greater the lie, he said, the more likely they will believe it, especially if one repeats the lie often. Trump is very good at it. So the consolidation of power is a very important component in all of this. They keep talking about nationalism, extreme nationalism, employment, and all of those different sorts of things. More flags and symbols, surrounding themselves with sycophants. We find the leadership cult. I've written a poem about sycophants in my mentor. You elect walls, we heard about that a little while ago. In some cases, leave international groups like the League of Nations in a long time ago, undermine treaties and ignore treaties, build roads and cars. Whoa. Volkswagen, interstates, all that kind of stuff. Drain swamps, real swamps in the case of Mussolini, but in another case, maybe you're getting into a deeper swamp. Sponsoring war is a very, very prominent feature. Hitler, the Rhineland, Austria, the Sudetenland, Poland, Russia, Mussolini, our little dictator, Abyssinia, Greece, Putin, South Ossetia, Georgia, Ukraine, Crimea, and the Arctic. You don't know what's going on in the Arctic for the most part, but he's got several troop contingents stationed there. Trump, interesting enough, we're not about war. Well, we're going to spend more money on troops, Don't worry about civilians, he said, in the fight against ISIS, the attack in Syria, and of course the idea of global war. Immediately, all of these individuals move against the main obstacles to power. Change the conversation in society into a new tone. It has changed in this country. I noticed it when I came back, and you notice it immediately. Freedom of speech, my God, it's gone. We already know it. Einstein lost his job almost immediately after he went to a free press conference in Berlin, freedom of speech conference in Berlin. One of my father's professors lost his job almost immediately when he, in a beer hall, said something against Hitler. Erdogan arrests journalists, police officers, and others who object. Freedom of assembly, my God, we haven't gotten there yet. But the others did, Putin, Erdogan, and look at some of the South American stuff. Press, always attack and suppress the press. Other media, that is to say, all the other media that are not for the person who is in charge. Mussolini, I said, used the radio on newspapers. Hitler used the phrase Lügenpresse, and we have the same thing, fake news going on in this country now. Putin, Erdogan, they all talk about the press that is against them, that is, the powerhouses of the press. Arrest journalists. Of course, they did that in Germany and Turkey, and we only arrested one so far. Create own outlets, government presses, TASS, Fox News, Twitter, attacked regional bureaucracies almost instantaneously. Arrests of leading individuals in these bureaucracies, put enemies of the bureaucracy in charge of the bureaucracy. I can give you example after example of how different individuals in the past have done that. Lenin did it, Hitler did it, Putin did it, Erdogan is doing it, Trump. Well, look at who he appoints to certain offices and you see the same pattern. Judiciary, attack the judiciary. Hitler was very good at it. Milosevic, Erdogan, all of them have immediately attacked the judiciary. It's unbelievable what happens to the judiciary. In this country, it's going very nicely so far. Undermine or co-opt parliaments. Hitler, Maduro in Venezuela. It's just amazing how quickly all that starts and then continues to flow. Then, of course, continue to fight against enemy ethnic groups. Jews, Muslims, Kurds, Mexicans, all those others. Sideline opposition, outsiders. Arrest and immediately take care of the others who are against you. The first people in Germany who were put into concentration camps were not Jews. They were socialists and communists. And, first to political opposition, and then the further you go, the more dramatic it gets. We're not there yet, don't get worried. Erdogan, Peron, all of these people do the same thing. Rants against their own staffs. Amazingly enough, Hitler had many outbursts against his own staff. Putin constantly is changing his staff and gets mad at them. Erdogan does the same thing. Trump, no, he wouldn't do that. He only gets red-faced and fires people. Murder the opposition, we don't do that. We just fire them. Music, it's a tremendous tool in all of these authoritarian personalities. So, you play Wagner and all those other great things in one society. And I am surprised in this country, Trump has had a hard time attracting certain kinds of groups which are the most modern in our music. Fear is the key component in all of these different things. One of the things that so surprises me, and I have to say, is that massive corruption in each one of these regimes, secrecy behind closed doors. Trump, for example, and this is not new in any of these regimes, he doesn't like to list visitors who come to the White House and to the Florida White House. Why should he, after all? Financial corruption, tremendous personal corruption, political corruption, personal gain. None of this is new. Hitler was a millionaire when he died. Guess how? He was a corrupt damn man. in addition to all the other terrible things that he did. Putin, a plutocrat, a major proponent. All his friends are plutocrats. Oh, we don't have that problem. Trump doesn't have any plutocrats around him. No, they just work for, it's a little bit further down here, Gives permission for members of their organizations to misbehave. Yeah, exactly. Excuse the behavior of your friends and say things, nasty things about. I could tell you about the story of my father. My father, how that works, how members of the organizations misbehave. His first assistant, still alive, is 94 years old. He saw me, he said, "You must be blah, blah, blah's son." I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Your father was a good man, unlike the others in his office." And I thought, that's the kind of misbehavior that he, this young guy at 18 years old, experienced. People get right into this misbehaving almost immediately and get permission to misbehave, permission to lie. Neighbors on all levels. Okay, outcomes. Of course we have to have outcomes. Initially, tremendous successes. Total immunity to failure, but long failure in the long run. Almost all of these authoritarians, except for Chancellor Ryan University, Mussolini, he was hung upside down north of Milan. Hitler, he killed himself. Anybody who tells you he didn't is wrong. Milosevic, he died at The Hague on trial. Berlusconi, he was finally defrocked. It's not that the women got him in trouble, I don't think. It's some other things. Putin, it's interesting how his regime is beginning at the edges to crumble. More and more people are protesting against him in spite of being killed, in spite of being Erdogan. He is now in the 1933-34 period, so it is upswing, and you'll see horrible things. And with Trump, I sort of agree with Paul, indirectly. Trump is too lazy to be a real dictator. He just doesn't have that kind of, you'd think, from all the activity, but deep down I don't think he is that. It takes somebody like Putin to be persistent and do it daily. He's already complained how difficult his job is. He didn't realize how difficult the presidency is. So, why the failures? The Greeks knew it. Hubris, overreach, loss of edge, overconfidence, sycophants who keep telling you the right things, that you think are the right things, but they're really telling you what you want to hear and may get you into the collapse of the group fantasy that got the person in office in the first place. The childhood experience of the leader and the society often matched. That was particularly true with Hitler. And when that moves on, that experience, that the leader is not in tune anymore with the society as a whole. There is lots of literature that I could tell you, but there's a wonderful, wonderful article, it was in the New York Times, recently by the grandson of Roosevelt's vice president, and it's called, it's by Henry Scott Wallace, and it's entitled American Fascism in 1944 and Today. It was in the New York Times, 12 May 2017. It kind of tells you some of the things, why I'm suspecting that these other authoritarians or aspirant dictators are similar to ours, except ours hopefully is not that determined to be a dictator, so he'll fail in the end. He may have an interesting presidency, but he'll fail, I hope, in the end. The last thing I want to say is what has happened with, and Paul answered this in part, what has happened with Trump, he is everywhere, wherever you go. And that in itself, I think, is going to ultimately turn the tide. It's already begun. I was telling someone yesterday in Germany, I did an interview, people talk to you constantly because you're an American. And one of the things that has happened is at first, it was total astonishment this man would win, and I only say 1933. And then The next thing is, about 2-3 weeks ago, fear. Unbelievable fear. The man will start a war. Now it is, my God, we've got to do something because this is terrible. And you see it now happening both with Merkel and the opposition. That's not the only country where this is happening. It's happening all over Europe, and it's happening in other countries where they realize it. So it's overstayed already. It is welcome. That can happen to a dictator. That can happen to an aspirant dictator as well. So thank you very much for listening.